You're keen to get smart on something that's been a massive part of our cultural conversation, Top Gear, without getting bogged down in endless clips and opinions, right? That's exactly what we're doing today. We're diving deep into what made that show tick.
Indeed. For anyone who might be new to the petrolhead party, Top Gear, in its most iconic iteration, was fronted by Jeremy Clarkson, Richard Hammond, and James May. While ostensibly about cars reviews, tests, the whole 9 yards had exploded into a global phenomenon by layering in outrageous movie-scale stunts and a very particular, often self-deprecating British sense of humor. It truly reshaped how car media was presented.
Absolutely. And for this deep dive, we've got a fantastic collection of material to explore. We've been poring over YouTube transcripts of some of the show's most talked about moments, alongside a really insightful retrospective article. Our goal is to pull out the key nuggets, those surprising insights, and, let's be honest, those moments that had us all in stitches.
And as always, it's crucial to remember that we're here to explore what was in these sources. The perspectives and opinions you might hear from the Top Gear presenters within these clips and the article are theirs. We're aiming to understand the content and why it struck such a chord with so many viewers.
Okay, let's unpack this. Starting on the topic, Top Gear seemed to have a real love-hate relationship with caravans. Jeremy Clarkson, in some early material, almost sounds like a champion of the humble caravan, doesn't he?
He does. He mentions the Camping and Caravan Club, its surprisingly reasonable annual fee of £41.
41 pounds, yeah.
And even makes a case for holidaying right here in Britain. You almost think he means it.
Huh.
Until the other shoe drops. What's fascinating here is that initial setup, taking something often seen as a bit uncool and presenting a positive, almost sensible angle.
Exactly. And then, bam, we get the classic Clarkson takedown. Owning a caravan, in his view, makes you completely mad. What's interesting is the comedic duality at play, that quick switch from potential appreciation to outright derision.
As a perfect example of their comedic approach, setting up an expectation and then gleefully subverting it. His humorous take on leaving the comforts of home to, as he puts it, defecate in a bucket, though he does acknowledge modern sites have facilities, really plays on that tension between the idealized holiday and the practical realities. This kind of exaggeration for comedic effect was a top-tier staple.
Yeah, definitely. And it wasn't just Clarkson firing shots. Hammond got in on the act with his own brand of humor. His line about a caravanning holiday to Cornwall being his most successful ever attempt to be born is pure self-deprecating Hammond.
Right.
Plus, the irony of him then buying a Volkswagen camper van, suggesting he's not anti-leisure vehicle, just maybe prefers something a bit more agile.
Precisely. It speaks to the nuances in their humor. Hammond's wasn't necessarily about outright negativity, but more about wry observation and self-effacement. And then you have James May's contributions, often delivered with that trademark deadpan. A segment titled Missing Words in Caravan Times, with May at the helm, just has an inherent comedic potential in his delivery alone.
But it wasn't all talk, was it? Top Gear's relationship with caravans often involved a more direct approach. Let's just say a significant number of caravans met rather explosive ends on that show. What do these destructive stunts tell us about the show's creative mindset?
Well, what's fascinating here isn't just the destruction for its own sake, but the way Top Gear took a mundane object, something often seen as a symbol of dullness and slow living, and elevated it to the realm of high-octane absurdity. This subversion of the ordinary, taking something predictable and making it wildly unexpected, was a key element of their comedic formula. Setting them on fire, driving through them, it became a recurring visual punchline.
And then they took the absurdity dial and cranked it way up with those outlandish modifications. A caravan airship? I mean, where do you even begin with that?
No.
And a lowrider caravan, you have to admire the sheer commitment to taking a simple concept and pushing it to its most ridiculous extreme.
It's that dedication to taking a seemingly straightforward idea and exploring its most illogical and entertaining conclusion that really defined the show's creative spirit. The modification of caravans to resemble railway carriages, complete with a tongue-in-cheek class system, first class, second class, and scum class, is another perfect illustration of their willingness to blend creative silliness with a touch of social commentary.
And it seems their portrayal of caravans wasn't always universally loved. The fact that the presenters promised to never ever go caravanning again after apparently receiving 150 complaints about a previous segment speaks volumes about the reaction their segments could generate.
Yeah, that's quite something.
Clarkson's sarcastic follow-up, "I'm sorry we didn't burn more caravan," is just peak Clarkson, isn't it? What does this tell us about their relationship with their audience?
It highlights that provocative edge, that while sometimes attracting criticism, also kept the show in the cultural conversation. They weren't afraid to court controversy for comedic effect. And then you stumble across those utterly bizarre tidbits, like the statistic mentioned in relation to a supposed best drive to a caravan site ever. 37% of caravanners enjoy wife swapping. Where on earth did that come from?
Right.
It's that blend of car-related content with completely random, often eyebrow-raising information that was part of the Top Gear DNA.
Exactly. You just have to laugh and move on. But it does show the kind of unexpected information that could just pop up. The discussion also touches on real-world issues, like the proposed restrictions for caravans on the M5 motorway during peak times, and the surprising existence of an all-party caravan lobby at Westminster. Who knew that caravanning had such political clout?
It underscores how deeply ingrained caravanning is in British culture, even if it's often the butt of jokes. And the final point about cautioning motorcyclists about overtaking caravans brings it back to the practical realities of sharing the road, a reminder that beneath the humor, there was often a grounding in real-world driving.
Okay, shifting gears now, pun intended. Let's talk about Richard Hammond and his, well, let's call it an eventful history with various modes of transport. Numerous car crashes feels like a significant understatement. What do these repeated incidents and the way they were dressed on the show say about Hammond's persona and the show's overall tone?
The running gag around Hammond's crashes really became part of his on-screen identity. It wasn't just cars, there were motorcycles, a radio van, and of course the infamous jet-powered dragster incident.
Oh, yeah.
And the fact that Yorkshire is mentioned as a location where all three presenters managed to have accidents is a rather unfortunate claim to fame for the region. These incidents, especially the more serious ones, could have been handled very differently. Instead, the show often leaned into the humor, albeit sometimes dark humor, which speaks to the resilience of Hammond's character and the show's ability to find light in potentially serious situations.
The Rimac Concept 1 crash in Switzerland is particularly memorable, partly due to the sheer force of the impact, but then Clarkson gifting Hammond his utterly destroyed watch as a present, complete with a rather morbid inscription that's a very specific type of humor, isn't it?
It's a very Clarkson gesture, taking a potentially traumatic event and finding a way to inject humor into it, albeit a slightly macabre humor. The inscription on the box, made in Switzerland, and then carefully perfected on the 10th of June 2017 by the British, adds that extra layer of dry wit. It's a way of acknowledging the seriousness while still maintaining their comedic dynamic.
And the banter that followed, with Clarkson suggesting Hammond needed running shoes with the Rimac logo, only for Hammond to point out quite reasonably that he broke his leg.
Yeah, right.
It's that quick, almost brutal, but ultimately affectionate back and forth that defines so much of their interaction.
Exactly. It's a dynamic built on years of working together, a kind of unspoken understanding that allows them to tease each other relentlessly, even about significant events. It's a key ingredient in their on-screen chemistry.
Now let's move on to the often more subtle but equally hilarious moments involving James May. His humor often stems from the unexpected, his very particular habits, or his wonderfully understated reactions. What are some of the recurring comedic themes in May's contributions?
May's humor frequently plays on his established persona of Captain Slow, the mild-mannered, often pedantic one. Take the Africa special. The image of May seemingly finding peace and serenity, immediately juxtaposed with him bellowing, "Clarkson!" because Clarkson had damaged his car, is a perfect example of this simmering frustration finally boiling over in a completely unexpected way.
Yes.
It's a contrast between his usual demeanor and the sudden outburst that's so funny.
And Rambo May in the Bolivia special, threatening Clarkson and Hammond with a machete after Clarkson crashed into him.
Oh, well.
It's that sudden, almost cartoonish shift from calm to surprisingly aggressive that catches you off guard and makes you laugh.
It's playing with audience expectations. You've come to expect a certain level of reservedness from May, so when he deviates so dramatically, it has a much bigger comedic impact. Then there's the legendary sequence of his utter boredom while driving the Dacia Sandero in Ukraine, culminating in his almost casual attempts to set off a nuclear missile with a lighter. I think it must be damp. Has become an iconic line for a reason.
It really has.
It's the sheer incongruity of the situation and May's utterly nonchalant delivery that makes it so brilliant.
It's the complete lack of urgency while trying to ignite a potential nuclear catastrophe that's just galled. And then there's his entirely unexpected victory during the cooking segment with Gordon Ramsay. His laid-back admission, "I don't really know what I'm talking about, to be honest. I usually, by the time I get this far, I'm so drunk I can't remember what I've done," followed by somehow winning. That's pure May in a nutshell. What does this tell us about his comedic appeal?
It's the antithesis of Ramsey's intense, high-pressure style, which makes May's accidental success even funnier. It's the triumph of the underdog, achieved through sheer haplessness. And let's not forget the ongoing saga of his aquarium in Mozambique, the ill-fated water tank for fish that was just a constant source of minor disasters, perfectly fitting his luckless persona.
Right.
Or his ever-reliable catchphrase, "Oh, cuck," in moments of minor catastrophe. It's become a verbal shorthand for things going slightly wrong in a very James May way.
And his forays into technology, like the slightly awkward adoption of the robot tour guide Robohan in Japan, always seem to have this undercurrent of gentle humor. And of course, the running gag about the Dacia Sandero during the news segment, the sheer dedication to a joke about a decidedly unexciting car was, in itself, quite amusing.
It's the commitment to a bit, no matter how seemingly mundane, that builds the humor over time. It becomes an inside joke between the presenters and the audience. And then you have the moments of brilliantly absurd logic, like his refusal to believe a picture of a six-wheeled Mercedes showed Hitler driving. His reasoning, he's just there to do some hand signals, really. What signals are you doing there then, James? He's saying take the Third Reich. It's just wonderfully, hilariously nonsensical.
Right. Moving on to the savage moments, often courtesy of Jeremy Clarkson, he certainly had a talent for the pointed and often outrageous remark. What role did this more controversial humor play in the show's success?
Clarkson's savage moments were definitely a double-edged sword. His rant about American language differences, that frustration with seemingly unnecessary alterations to perfectly good English words, is a classic example of his observational and often exasperated humor that many viewers found relatable.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then there were the deliberate pranks, like tricking Hammond into asking for Yayam Abalanda in Italy. The humor here lies in the absurdity of the phrase and Hammond's unwitting participation, highlighting their playful, if sometimes mischievous, dynamic.
And the outright sabotage during the public transport race to Niagara Falls, actively getting Hammond and May blacklisted by an airline. That takes competitive to a whole new level.
It really does.
It's a borderline villainous act, but always presented with a wink and a nod for comedic effect. And his often broad stereotypes, like Jaguar drivers being slimy and untrustworthy, were always delivered with a certain theatricality, even if they were undeniably generalizations.
The water tampering incident with Hammond's lorry shower water tank is another level of savage, verging on the unpleasant. The petty revenge, the sheer ick factor. It's certainly memorable. And his airport rant about Stansted, the security, and the unfortunate advert featuring James May, the dismissive look at that half-wit line, is pure Clarksonian disdain aimed squarely at his colleagues for comedic effect. And of course, the regular jabs at Piers Morgan and the BBC became almost a running gag in themselves. This willingness to be controversial, to push boundaries with humor, was a key part of Clarkson's and, by extension, Top Gear's identity, even if it wasn't always universally appreciated.
But it wasn't all scripted insults. There were plenty of moments where the presenters genuinely broke character and just lost it laughing. What made these unscripted moments so special for the audience?
Those moments of genuine, unforced laughter were incredibly infectious for the viewers. Hammond and May getting separated in Japan during that public transport race, Clarkson getting completely lost. The real confusion and frustration bubbling to the surface, leading to spontaneous, uncontrolled laughter during their radio communications, felt authentic and relatable.
Definitely.
The meat car prank, the sheer ridiculousness of placing a cow's head in May's car to attract lions, and the anticipation of his reaction. It was a prank born out of pure mischief, and the resulting laughter was genuine.
The British Leyland Challenge was a goldmine for these moments. Clarkson's rover door just falling clean off, that was pure, unscripted chaos, and their reactions were priceless.
Oh, absolutely.
The lorry challenge with those out-of-control rigs and burning hair bales had that same sense of genuine mayhem that just dissolved into laughter.
It's the unexpected failures and the unscripted moments of things going spectacularly wrong that often produce the biggest laughs. The worst electric car challenge, the hover van comically crashing into everything with a presenter ending up in the river, the perilously unstable raft crossing these were situations where the inherent absurdity of the challenge and the genuine struggle of the presenters led to real, unadulterated amusement.
And the 17-year-old challenge, their utterly hopeless attempts to be quiet and failing so spectacularly. The Vietnam special, with the locals enthusiastically painting Hammond's motorbike bright pink and his hilariously deflated reaction. The ambulance challenge, particularly May's notoriously slow closing and then abruptly falling open door, and Hammond accidentally launching his patient. And of course, the now legendary Oliver moment with Hammond's beloved Opel Kadett in Botswana. These were all instances where the genuine fun they were having on screen translated directly to the audience.
They were moments of pure, unadulterated reaction to the often ridiculous situations they found themselves in. And that authenticity is what made them so engaging and enjoyable to watch. It reminded us that despite these sometimes outrageous stunts and opinions, at its heart, it was also a show about three friends having often disastrous adventures.
Let's touch on the Top Gear News segment. This was often a platform for some truly bizarre and funny takes on the automotive world and beyond. What made this segment such a consistent source of humor?
Well, the Top Gear News segment was effective because it took real-world automotive news and filtered it through the presenter's very specific and often cynical perspectives. Clarkson's unbridled joy at the discontinuation of the Volkswagen Beetle, complete with a rather skewed history lesson linking it to Hitler and V-1 bombs. That's a very particular and very Clarkson reason to dislike a car. And it was delivered with such conviction, it was funny.
Yeah, it really was.
And his very public promise to eat his own hair if the production Vauxhall Astra resembled its initial, rather outlandish design sketch, only for the actual car to be considerably more mundane. The anticipation and the eventual payoff were inherently comedic.
Jonathan Ross's famously expensive number plate also became fodder for the Clarkson commentary machine, and Stagecoach's somewhat drastic decision to remove the lavatory from a long-distance bus in the name of profit prompted Clarkson's brilliantly absurd and satirical suggestion to simply make every seat a toilet. That's taking a real-world problem and pushing it to a ludicrous yet thought-provoking extreme.
Exactly. It was his way of highlighting the inherent absurdity of the cost-cutting measure through an even more absurd counterproposal. His often blunt and negative reactions to new car designs, like his assessment of the Ferrari Scaglietti's appearance, the unfortunate and slightly puerile naming of the Ford Fiesta ST sanitary towel, and the diesel potentially being STD.
Oh dear.
And his succinct description of the Mini Cabriolet as a metrosexual car, these were all delivered with his characteristic lack of filter, which was a key part of the humor.
The quick depreciation of luxury cars like the Maybach becoming a punchline, the humorous and often slightly naughty advertising hoarding messages they'd highlight, even Clarkson's admission of boredom with the incredible performance of a Ferrari 430 and his nomination for the ugliest car ever made. The Hyundai Matrix Sanyong Rodius. It was a relentless stream of strong opinions, often controversial, but almost always entertaining.
And the anticlimactic reveal that new Mini variants would include an estate, the slightly risque joke about a motoring website for homosexuals being called Top Queer, the concerning statistic about young drivers under the influence of drugs leading to Clarkson's typically over-the-top drug testing suggestions. The Dodge Caliber turning out to be smaller and less expensive than anticipated it was a real grab bag of automotive news and social commentary, invariably delivered with a comedic slant.
Even seemingly minor things, like an embarrassing photo of Renault Formula One drivers, became fodder for their humor. The story of a woman being prosecuted for overtaking a cyclist too closely, compared to the apparent lack of action on missing pedophiles, prompted a darkly satirical legal loophole suggestion from Clarkson.
Wow.
Their ongoing disagreements about what constituted a good or bad car, even down to something like the impractical rear doors of the new Mini Clubman, showed their individual quirks and preferences.
From discussions about the surprisingly high value of classic cars and their predictions for future investments, name-checking models like the Rolls-Royce Corniche and Mercedes 600 Grosser to the Dacia Duster being named Budget 4x4 of the Year, even Clarkson's attempts to embrace cycling and the ensuing debate about Lycra shorts leading to his invention of the stealth bicycle, the news segment covered a remarkably broad spectrum.
They even delved into Formula One regulations, with Clarkson offering his own wacky races-inspired rule changes. The ethical dilemmas posed by driverless cars, the moral maze scenario, the reopening of the historic Brooklands racetrack, the surprising origins of convertible off-road vehicles, even ideas for less distracting motorway signage in the form of pub quiz questions. It was a real mishmash of car culture and random observations.
His often bemused reactions to American food habits, like seemingly putting strawberries on everything, the appearance of a full-size Hot Wheels model of a Chevrolet Camaro, the recurring theme of classic cars as a better investment than banks, The inherent impracticality of a 300-horsepower convertible Land Rover Evoque.
Yeah, that one was odd.
Clarkson's less-than-successful attempt to remove his L-plates with fizzers before his driving test. The government scrappage scheme and its potential, and likely exaggerated, negative impact on the South Korean economy. The ever-increasing number of Formula One teams and Clarkson's enthusiastic support for Kit Kat Motorsport. Even the news that police were considering using electric vehicles. The sheer variety is striking.
And it continued right up to Aston Martin testing the V12 Zagato at the Nürburgring, prompting May's rather extreme desire to bomb it, a Swiss company modifying a Jaguar E-Type and unfortunately naming it the Growler.
Oh no.
The impracticality of the new Mini Countryman having only 4 seats, Clarkson's perhaps tongue-in-cheek belief that murderers drive Renault S-Bases, government proposals regarding whiplash claims based on impact speed, and Land Rover's ongoing work on a convertible evoke a truly eclectic and often hilarious roundup of automotive and occasionally tangential news.
It really shows how they could take even the most mundane piece of automotive news and inject their own brand of humor and opinion into it, making it engaging even for those who weren't necessarily die-hard car enthusiasts.
Now, the deleted scenes from the Polar Special offered a fascinating peek behind the curtain, revealing the anticipation of potential disasters. What stands out from these outtakes?
The deleted scenes really highlighted the inherent risks and the presenter's somewhat apprehensive mindset going into such an extreme environment. The looming threat of polar bears was a recurring theme, and their own acknowledged ignorance about the Arctic conditions added a layer of vulnerability. Even the expectation that they would likely end up hating each other due to the extreme cold painted a picture of a potentially very challenging journey.
Yeah.
Clarkson's colleagues' recollection of contemplating shooting him during a previous polar expedition certainly sets a dramatic, if darkly humorous, tone.
And the surprisingly high likelihood of encountering polar bears much higher than they initially seemed to think. The details of their planned route to the magnetic North Pole, including the ominously named Polar Bear Pass on Bathurst Island, and the very real danger of falling through the ice near their ultimate goal, really underscored the genuine peril they were facing.
The almost morbidly philosophical discussion about their preferred method of demise, freeze to death or drown first, and the rather bleak consensus of freezing while drowning. It's a very dark, but also darkly humorous reflection on the seriousness of their situation.
Wow.
The information about the immense size and incredibly sensitive sense of smell of polar bears, even the surprisingly detailed discussion about the insulation properties of their fur, all painted a picture of a formidable and potentially dangerous environment. Even the unexpected distance they covered due to wheel spin on the ice hinted at the unpredictable nature of their journey.
Hammond's almost comical envy of dogs, initially seen as potential helpers, and the quick realization of their impracticality for Arctic transport, along with the looming prospect of a boulder field on the ice, all contributed to the sense of a journey fraught with potential mishaps and challenges, even in the moments that didn't make the final broadcast.
It underscored that even in their most ambitious and seemingly serious endeavors, the potential for things to go hilariously wrong, often due to their own inexperience or the sheer unpredictability of the situation, was always lurking just around the corner.
And finally, let's revisit the Vietnam Motorbike Special Part 1. The initial sight of them in tailored clothing that looked far more appropriate for a formal diplomatic reception than a sweaty motorbike adventure across Vietnam is just comedy gold. What does this visual gag tell us about the show's humor?
It immediately sets a tone of deliberate incongruity. The sheer inappropriateness of their attire for the task at hand is the primary joke. Hammond's somewhat delicate Minsk motorbike needing to be dried out, the wonderfully awkward and slightly passive-aggressive exchange about their outfits. Is that a smoking jacket? Is that a mod coat? It's all part of establishing their fish-out-of-water dynamic.
The seemingly random, almost surreal addition of a dolphin image on Clarkson's bike, and the perfectly chosen present for James May, that classical ballet sticker for his rather staid motorbike. It's those little unexpected visual details that add another layer of humor.
Definitely.
But the real highlight has to be the enthusiastic townspeople spontaneously deciding to give Richard Hammond's motorbike a vibrant pink makeover, despite the other's feeble attempts to intervene.
Hammond's utterly bewildered and increasingly irritated reaction to his newly fluorescent pink bike, coupled with the incredibly weak excuse offered, "the chef did it," is a perfect illustration of their established on-screen dynamic. Clarkson and May often acted as instigators of chaos, with Hammond frequently finding himself on the receiving end of their mischief.
And finally, looking at the Reddit discussion on funniest moments really highlights just how many iconic and enduring comedic beats Top Gear produced over the years. What's striking about the moments that resonated most with fans?
What's fascinating when you look at that compilation of fan-favorite moments is the sheer breadth of humor that connected with the audience. You have everything from the physical comedy of the Reliant Robin endlessly tipping over in the hover van disasters
Yeah, the Reliant Robin.
to character-driven humor, like James May's exasperated outbursts and his unexpected moments of ineptitude, to Clarkson's more deliberately provocative and often outrageous remarks, the teenager challenge outburst, May's banging stereo driving, even the slightly more obscure Stephen Fry showing Jeremy how to use grader comment. It shows the diverse ways the show made people laugh.
The recurring visual gags like Hammond's Anarchy Flagwater Lilo incident, alongside more subtle, almost throwaway lines like the heroin addict's comment about not waking parents, or the visual gag of the gay pride flag at James May's meticulously organized site.
Right.
Even moments of pure, unadulterated slapstick like Hammond launching his patient through the ambulance window. And it's interesting how often James May's genuine laughter is mentioned. It seems his breaking character was particularly infectious.
Absolutely. Moments like James laughing at Jeremy in the motorhome challenge or any instance of his usually reserved demeanor cracking into genuine amusement really resonated. The physical comedy of the door falling off the British Leyland car, Jeremy disappearing in wheel smoke, even the presenters actively and comedically trying to sabotage each other in challenges like the Alabama special. And the graffiti incidents, country and western is rubbish and man love rules okay, represent that blend of automotive adventure with irreverent humor.
Even specific lines like James's utterly deadpan, everything that's actually important to the car works perfectly, apart from the handbrake in Botswana, or Jeremy's exasperated commentary on Hammond's inability to start a car, and the sheer absurdity of Jeremy having a cow on the roof of his Camaro. It's a catalog of controlled chaos and often unexpected brilliance.
And the variety. From the simple visual gag of the pink motorbike in Hammond's despair, Officer Barbie has arrived, to more nuanced, almost catchphrase-like moments like, I think it must be damp. The sat-nav directions with deliberately unhelpful targets, Clarkson's casual offer of cannabis, even his hilariously inadequate wooden handbrake.
Ah, the handbrake.
And the running jokes that developed over time, like James's questionable shotgun skills in the Polar Special or Richard's genuine terror of bugs, it all contributed to this rich tapestry of comedic moments.
Even Clarkson's self-aware humor, like his useful feature comment after tipping the Reliant Robin, or the sheer absurdity of pulling out a machine gun for a winter biathlon, immediately followed by a tree falling down, James's perfectly delivered line. With Jeremy handling a gun, you are completely safe as long as you're standing in front of the target.
Brilliant line.
And the recurring image of James in various states of discomfort or minor peril falling on a plank, shivering in a convertible S-base.
And let's not forget Clarkson's often scathing but undeniably funny reviews, like his take on the MG X-Power SV and his gleeful mockery of BMW. The sheer visual of only Clarkson's nose being visible as his method of dust avoidance in Botswana, the literal disintegration of James's limousine steering wheel, Jeremy driving his tiny P45 car into a library, even Clarkson's dramatic breakdown, and Hammond's complete lack of sympathy as he drove past shouting, "Lovely evening." It's that consistent blend of genuine mishap and deliberate comedic exaggeration.
Right down to Hammond building a barrier on entirely the wrong ski slope, the slightly suggestive James was suspiciously skilled with the Vaseline and condoms comment, Clarkson's over-the-top reaction to a woman's innocent comment about children, the revelation of Clarkson's secret weapon in the Caravan holiday segment. The unforgettable image of the Asian guy with the swastika helmet on a motorcycle in Vietnam, the frequent bellowing of Malai, and the ongoing struggle to explain away the failings of the British Leyland cars, even a random log smashing Jeremy's rear window, the iconic Clarkson bellow in Uganda, the casual making fun of Germans, the surreal image of Jeremy in a Bill Oddie mask,
Oh, I forgot about that.
the heroin, which was actually Rice incident, Clarkson's dramatic cry of, "Ow, my arm parts," while being pulled out of mud, the universally understood, "It's not gone well." The hilariously pixelated image in the ambulance challenge, James's eternal struggle to light a rocket, Clarkson's somewhat questionable declaration of being sexually excited by the front of an Alfa Romeo, the repeated launching of the unfortunate patient through the ambulance window.
Our patient.
Hammond's disastrous arrival in his Mini in India. Hammond, you idiot. Jeremy's relatable struggle with semi-truck trailers, the endless tipping of the Reliant Robin, James's unrestrained laughter in the camper van challenge, Richard's reckless overtaking of James, and the final, perhaps most telling point. Everyone suddenly deciding workplace violence should be tolerated. It's an absolutely staggering list.
It really is. It's incredible.
Well, that was a truly comprehensive and often hilarious deep dive into the world of Top Gear as seen through the lens of our sources. Hopefully, you now feel thoroughly well informed without feeling like you've just mainlined an automotive encyclopedia.
We certainly uncovered a wealth of surprising moments, a few questionable statistics, and a seemingly endless supply of memorable anecdotes. From exploding caravans and brightly colored motorbikes to James May's existential battles with mundane machinery, it's been quite a ride.
It really makes you consider what the secret to Top Gear's enduring appeal was. Was it the impressive cars, the over-the-top stunts, the exotic locations? Or was it the undeniably unique chemistry and utterly distinct personalities of those three very British men and their consistently unconventional, often controversial, but always captivating antics? If any of these moments sparked your curiosity, maybe it's time to revisit those specific episodes.
And with the recent conclusion of the Grand Tour, reflecting on these classic Top Gear moments really prompts a fascinating question. What is it about our relationship with cars and the people who can talk about them in such an irreverent and often absurd way that held our attention for so long and continues to resonate? It's definitely food for thought.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.